Welcome back, folks. Today's lesson is going to be showing you how to paint a Warhammer 40,000 orc, in this case a big boy. So we're going to be showing exactly how to paint the model. We're going to add some tone shifts, kind of add different layering techniques to improve on what you already know how to do. So for the beginning of this, I'm going to be adding some blue as a sort of a base cool tone, and then I'm going to be adding like a violet pink as like a warm tone to start the base colors for what I'm trying to accomplish here. So first, I am going to wet my brush ever so slightly and use a teal blue. In this case, it's going to be a crystal blue. It's a lot brighter in pigment than what one would usually use, but I need to see exactly how it's going to conform to the skin. You ever seen a blue orc before? I'm just gonna start layering this onto the skin. I don't really care much if any gets on the straps or some of the metal armor that is on his main torso. That's gonna be colored entirely different anyway. I'm just gonna be layering this after a bit, see where it leads me to. I'm blue, I believe I'm gonna die. Don't copyright me. Okay, now that that is dried, I'm going to be using a Volupus pink to add that warm tone to the body. As you can see already with the blue tone, we still got that nice zenithal going on, so the lower areas are going to be much darker than the upper facing parts, especially on his musculature, which is going to be a lot of the definition. So I'm going to be using this thin brush here, so I can softly apply some of this Volupus pink. It's more of a magenta tone than anything, which works very well with what I'm doing with the work. So I'm going to thin it down, kind of apply it to the lip area where the most blood flow will be, where the skin is stretched. Like if you look at yourself in the mirror and you kind of like stretch your lips or your face and contort it in a certain way, you can see where some of the more fleshed areas of your face are going to be. And that is what I am aiming for. Plus this will aid in serving as a sort of like pre-pin wash, so that way I don't have to worry about it much when I'm trying to figure out the green layers and trying to accomplish that look. So yeah, see you in a jiffy. Okay, now that that has been applied, you can already tell we're getting some very nice definition in the skin already with that violet pink undertone. It's already starting to add some nice color variation, much like what you can see here in the face and the nostrils especially, while that bright blue zenithal on top is giving us a perfect foundation so we can start slapping some green on this boy properly with the correct waaagh flesh. That's as best of an organized as I can give. It's not the best. So I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be getting some of this color onto my brush, but slightly thinned down into a light glaze, almost as if I'm using a contrast, where it's a thick medium, but it's thin enough where the colors underneath will show, which is why I started with the blue accented zenithal. So that way, once I begin painting on the waaagh flesh green, we're going to get a nice coat. So I'm going to begin by kind of slathering that nice green on. And it's thinned down just enough to where that blue will start showing underneath. Even though it may look like it's going over the blue and overpowering it. If we really look underneath, it's kind of hard to see. You can see that very subtle blue shade going on at the top, and then that much darker kind of gray green on the bottom. That's what I'm accomplishing with the citadel. So I'll be getting back to painting the pillow and we'll show you the results after. Okay. Now, with that dry, you can see how nicely it's coming out so far. That blue sort of violet undertone is really helping with the paint. My camera is not the best at showing it, but you can tell there's still that nice little blue hue, which helped tint the waaagh flesh into this more kind of military green look going on. So what we're going to do now is use not only the waaagh flesh, but we're going to use a moot green, kind of combine the two, so we can start beginning the base highlights before we start going to a lighter color value, which is going to be a tan green for the final highlight. So for the 1-to-1, I'm just getting one little dab of that waaagh flesh, followed by one little dab on the brush of moot green. And then once those are applied, I'm gonna thin it down just a little bit. I don't want this to overpower it too much. I'm just gonna start glazing it onto the more prominent areas, like the top of the brow, top of the ear. So yeah, see, just sit it down nicely and just gently let the brush be guided by the creases of the model. Trying to avoid the deeper parts of the model, especially those lips. I want to keep some of that there. Yeah, let's get that applied. We're starting to get somewhere. It's looking nice so far. Leave some of his knuckles bare, coloring that majority. This little part here. Little thumb. Make sure the knuckles will be the brightest since they have the least flesh. There's that sound, so you'll have less dermis on that area. So you'll get a clearer vision of the bone. But we won't worry about that until we're ready for it. So yeah, so far with that moot green waaagh flesh mixture, we're getting a very nice tone so far. And we will come back once the results are done. Okay, now that that is applied, you can now really see those values we put on the undercoat are helping a lot. Like the deeper areas are having more of that tone we were looking for with the bluish violet. The uppermost areas are very nice green, like a lime almost. It kind of looks like we're just painting avocado right now. It's kind of funny. But now we're going to turn this avocado orc into an avocado lime orc. So now I'm going to get that same mixture I did before of the waaagh flesh with the moot green, but instead of it being a 1-to-1, I'm going to do 1 part of waaagh flesh and then a much more rich moot green of 2, possibly 3 parts. Kind of eyeballing it here. Then it's going to be more of a wet highlight than a glaze this time, because it's going to be the primary color focus of the skin before I begin with the tan green for the final highlights. So this I'm not going to be applying too crazy. Yeah. I'm only going to be applying it to the uppermost areas of the flesh. Make sure it's nice and thin. Not only for the best coverage, but when it dries, it's gonna be very, very nice looking, as you can already tell. Once that fully dries, it's gonna be perfectly bright. But remember, when you're painting the model and doing something like this, make sure you are focusing your highlights on the very upper, on the very upper parts of it, so you get the most vibrant highlights, especially where you want your main focus to be. In this orc's case, it's going to be his bulging physique, little Arnold bod going on here, especially with his brow. It's his most prominent feature in the face. I want to make sure that is as pronounced as possible. Make sure we properly highlight the cheekbone. I like those biceps, the giant biceps. Make sure the bicep, powerful orc. Yeah, that's my Arnold impression. I'm not doing it again. Well, yeah, I'm gonna be finishing up the final highlights before I go on to the very last highlight and minimal shading, and then we'll be good to go. Okay. Now we're back. The highlights have been applied, and wow, that is popping very nicely. What I'm going to be doing next is just using pure moot green for the last final skin highlights to bump up the contrast. Because after all that kind of like glazing and light layering, we're gonna need some boost in that contrast. Here I'm just very fairly gonna apply this moot green gently at the tips of it, especially on the knuckles. While it's still pretty thinned down. So that way it bumps up all those highlights very nicely. What I'm doing here, what I'm doing here for the highlight is I'm doing a soft stippling motion. So that way not only could I add some fake details of the natural pigmentation and speckling of skin on like any animal. There's always those like little freckles and like dinges and other terms that are used for just essentially saying people have different kinds of skin, depending on how leathery and how tough it is. I always imagine orcs, based off of their old inception in particular, to have kind of a like a leathery kind of pig skin, much like how when you cure animal hide for like a cloak or clothing or something like that. That's kind of how I envision their skin looking, or at least upon further inspection. So yeah, so far I'm loving those last little highlights to show off exactly how this guy's looking. And I'm gonna keep finishing up and then we'll see the result by then. Alright. Now with all that done, boy is he looking great. I love how the highlights came out. All the skin tones are just right. And now I'm gonna ruin it with highlights. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna get 2 parts of that moot green again, with 1 part of a bone white, like this right here. I'm gonna mix those together so so I can get a very rich, like kind of pasty green. I don't know what color to explain that with. Then I'm going to use this very handy super thin brush. I'm going to just highlight the brow ridges and some of the veins and stuff you see on the body. I'm going to do some light crosshatch glazing on some of the prominent parts of the flesh, so I can add some more texture. Especially with how this old sculpt is, it's better to highlight some of those finer details. Also, I really like this brush because of how long it is. It's what I use for some of my hand-drawn work. But this part I won't skip because I just want to show you exactly how lightly and how thin this is being applied. Alright, brows have been highlighted, cheeks flushed a little bit. That arm has been highlighted, the veins there. Oh yeah, that is a proper orc. Now what I'm going to do here is I am going to come back to that very nice voluptuous pink we used at the very beginning and just do one last pin shade. So pin wash. I'm just going to be using that color just to glaze in some last finishing shadows. Kind of like inside of the brow, need the eyeball. See, just very subtle like that. See this nostril. Feel like I'm picking his nose.
Yeah.
I'm going to be using that to highlight the inside of his mouth. Right where that skin near your cheeks and lips connect. I forgot the name of it. It's not like I took a year of science and biology or anything, am I right? Forgot most of that stuff a while ago. I still use it in art, but I kind of forgot. Yeah, I'm not skipping this part so you can clearly see how finely detailed and careful you have to be with doing this technique. Especially if you're using a very dark tone on a lighter material, because it's very easy to mess that up. Coloring that gash, put that in, get those highlights there, and there we are. In 20 minutes, for you viewers, for me it's actually been close to 40, we have a proper skin tone for an orc. Now this is the way I paint orcs. I like it because it gives that kind of World of Warcraft, like, fake painting kind of style. I mean, essentially they are painting the models. That's how a lot of their stuff looks. It has that kind of, like, comic shading feel to it. And that's what I love the most about doing with the orcs. You get the very subtle shades, the gradual layering and glazes atop, and then a final pin wash. And one last highlight in the vein here, I totally missed it. And there we are. One orc done. If you want to see the rest of him painted, I could make a video on that. Or I can just paint him and show you at the end to see how it looks all together. Other than that, thank you for your time. And you have a great one, fellas. And ladies. And doggos. Frankly, anyone who might be watching this, even an alien.